Welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. Today we have with us Bonnie Lewis, who's back on the show again. She came on before and talked about the breed Pomeranian powders. She's been a pigeon fancier for over 40 years. She's judged pigeon shows. She takes care of 8 lofts on her property with over 25 different breeds of pigeons. And she has some pretty old pigeons that have been in shows that she's had from her loft. So thanks for coming on and talking today, Bonnie.
Oh, not a problem. Always willing to help people that are looking for information.
Yep. And we're trying to learn about getting a bird ready for a show, prepping a bird. When do you really start? I know a lot of the shows kind of start at the beginning of the year. So what kind of time frame out do you start getting that bird ready?
Well, some of my birds, like the Pomeranian powders, if I have pairs that I know produce good young, but when they have young and those youngs are 2 weeks old, I pull them and I hand feed them because they make a steadier show bird. You know, you can walk up to them and you can stare at them and you can put your hand in the cage and they're not, freaking out and bouncing off the walls and dropping feathers and everything. So on some of the birds, I start really early with them because you want a nice steady bird. You don't want to have a beautiful bird and then it goes, crazy in the show cage and drops feathers or, breaks a blood feather or something.
Yeah.
So it just kind of all depends on the breed. Powders are a little bit trickier because they're literally, no blow, no show. The bird has to part of judging on it. It has to blow a globe. If it doesn't blow a globe, then you can't judge its globe.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to start young. Training them to either learn to blow when you snap your fingers, or if you puff your cheeks, or you make a certain noise, or signal you want to use for it. So you have to start kind of young with that. I mean, other birds, basically, you can just grab them and wash them and take them to the show.
So with the powders and stuff like that, are you actually putting them in a show cage and getting them used to it that way?
I find I really don't have to do that because the Pomeranian powders have got such a nice, calm personality as it is. And there's no cage training for them. They're not like some of the other pigeons, like any of the toy stencil breeds that are like really super fractious, and you put them in a show cage and they are just like, oh, and they bounce off the walls. Where the powders tend to be, especially the larger ones, tend to be a lot calmer, and they're just kind of like, okay, whatever. It's just totally different things you do for different breeds of birds.
Having such a variety of birds that you have there, we're gonna kind of talk on like the universal stuff. Do you change feed before a show, or do you do any kind of supplements or anything like that?
No, because I feed good food all year round.
Okay.
So it's not all of a sudden and it's like, oh, I've got stress bars on the feathers and now I need to give them, more protein or blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I myself practice good husbandry all year round. So that way it's like no big surprises or all of a sudden it's like, oh, bugs or, or anything like that. If you keep your lofts clean, feed your birds good food, practice good general husbandry all year round, getting ready for show really shouldn't be this big drama thing that a lot of people try to make it out to be.
You mentioned the last time we talked about you do like a tablespoon of bleach for a gallon of water and just keeping the water clean. And I started doing that with mine. And one of the things I noticed right away was just how clean my containers are when I go to clean them out now. They're just always really clean. And I really like that. That's been a really helpful thing. Sometimes I'll put supplements in there and the supplements would stain on my waterers and it just make a mess of things. So that was, just something like you say, you just do it all year. And yeah, I guess you're always show ready if you're doing it that way.
Well, yeah, and then and of course, because I give mine huge pans of water because the powders can't drink out of like those bullet waterers,
Mm.
as I've actually had them stick their heads in there and then they get freaked out by something and then
Oh,
they blow and then they drowned.
I never even thought of that. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are not overly smart. So I go to Dollar Tree and they have these 18-inch rubber oil change pans, about 25. They last forever. I buy them 10, 12 at a time. That's what I use in every loft. I keep bleach in every single one of them. And that way, if the birds want to bathe, they can because there's bleach in the water. The water is technically clean. even if the birds poop in it, it's still clean because there's bleach in it. That's why if you keep bleach in your water, you'll never go the next day and wash it out and have that slimy feel, because that slimy feel is bacteria. You'll never have that. And like you said, it keeps their feathers nice and white and clean, especially if you've got muffed birds. I mean, to me, that's probably one of the best things. And then there's a product, and Lord, I can't think of the name of it right now, and it's pouring down rain, so I'm not even going to run outside and get it. But you can buy it at any place that sells to the horsey crowd, and it is used to remove manure stains from a horse's butt. Okay, the green manure stains, and it's like a white foam. Basically, you soak the bird, and then you put the white foam on the bird, and you scrub the bird until both you and it are covered in blue foam, and the bird is unhappy and you're unhappy, and then you rinse it off, and it has a bleaching agent in it, and then you just make certain the bird is out in the sun for at least the better part of a day, and that bird will come sparkling white.
Wow, that'd be great for the muffed birds then, yeah, to clean up those bottom feathers.
Well, it's good for anything. Like I said, I showed the royal snows, and they do have a tendency to get underneath each other when one poops. Sometimes somebody gets pooped on or whatever, and you just wash them with it. It's a foam, and you're done washing when the foam turns blue. When the foam turns blue, you're done, and then you just dunk them in a bucket, rinse them off, and put them out in the screen coop where they can get some sun for the better part of the day. And they bleach right out. They look great. They smell good too.
What do you do for debugging your birds? Do you do like the permethrin dip, or do you spray the lofts? And how often are you doing that?
I use Adam's flea and tick spray for dogs. I've probably been using that for a good 15 years. It works great, and it smells good. And I just, as I notice, if I notice that someone has got a problem, because I check the rumps for the mites, and I check the flights and the chest for the feather lice. And if I see that somebody's got more than one or two of something, I just spray them down. And that's really all the more I do. I mean, unless you're like really, I don't even know if there's any way to even do it. I don't want to say anything that offend anybody, but I mean, unless you're like really persnickety, you are not going to get your birds 100% bug free. It's not going to happen. As long as I don't look at my bird and see scads of feather lice swimming in and out of the feathers, it's like, okay, they have one or two feather lice. I'm not going to get rid of them. Every bird, I can assure you, just about every bird at the bird show's probably got one or two lurking around on it or more. I just hit them with the Adams spray. You can buy it at Walmart. It's inexpensive. It's safe. I've used that for years.
And you just hold the bird in one hand and kind of just spray. Do you go under the wings with it? I mean, just spray the bird and that's it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
I tuck the bird under one underarm, and then with the free hand, I fluff up the neck, and I give it a shot on the neck, and I give it a shot on the rump, and then usually I go under the wings, set him free. It's like, there you go, because it takes care of them right away, and the bird's going to jump in the drinking water anyways and bathe itself off. So
Some of your lofts are pretty good size, and you give your pigeons a lot of room to be in there. And when it comes to, you got a bird that you want to take to the show, do you need to put that bird in a separate loft, or are your lofts big enough where they're fine where they are? They're not going to be ruffling feathers and stuff.
90% of them are fine just the way they are because I have big lofts and I don't crowd my birds. It's like the nest boxes that I use for my Pomeranian powders are 18-inch instead of 12-inch. Why? Because they're a bigger bird. They require a bigger bird. The only thing that I will separate a couple months before show, especially if it's like they're looking really good, are my old German croppers, because they are just so big and they drag their wings and they drag their tail. They're supposed to. That's what they do. And I've got 8 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot separate cages. And I usually only just take one to a show because I'm going to have the only one there anyways, so it's a moot point to take a bunch of them because I'm going to do nothing but show against myself pretty much. Unless Charlie Rowe happens to be at the show, and then he'll have his. But other than that, if I have one that looks super good, I'll pull him, clean him up, put him in one of those 8 by 4 cages, and then he can just hang out there for a month or so until it's showtime.
And when you bring your birds back, do you quarantine all your birds before putting them back in the loft from a show?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. I quarantine them for a minimum of 60 days.
Oh wow, that's a long quarantine.
Minimum. I have a separate quarantine area at the back of my property, and they go back there. They get fed and watered last. Once I touch and handle those birds, I consider myself done. I don't go and touch and handle anybody else. And even when I go from loft to loft, I have cans of water and bleach that I walk through just in case. You know, it's like, I know too many people that have had their lofts literally wiped out, and I'm going to do everything possible to make certain that doesn't happen to me.
No, that's good biosecurity. So you got like the pan that's in front of the door where you can like dunk your feet in bleach basically, or
Yeah, so the rectangle kitty litter pans, and I just put bleach and water in them. And basically, if you want to go inside my loft, you have to walk through it. There's really pretty much no way around it, and that way, just in case.
yeah, feeding those quarantine birds last. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. That makes a lot of sense.
I do everything in order. If you would see the way my lofts are set up, they're all the lofts are set up in a U, and I start at one end and work my way all the way around. Then I head to the back of the property and I deal with the quarantine birds. Once I am done with the quarantine birds, then I come into the house. I go out into the mudroom and I strip. None of my clothes or shoes that go out into the pigeons come into this house. And first thing I do, I jump in the shower, and that's it. I'm real paranoid about bringing something home.
And then so with that, with when you do bring those birds home, because going to the show and moving them around and stuff, so when they come back home, then it's right back to just clean water and good food, or do you do any supplements to them, or just right back in the routine with them?
Right back into the routine. My theory has always been, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I don't know how many people I know that they went to shows, and you can go to shows and you see all these birds, and the birds, you can tell they've got some type of meds or something in their water because their water's yellow or whatever color. If you would buy a bird like that and then bring it home to your loft and not continue to give it those antibiotics, that bird probably will not thrive and be successful in your loft because it does not have a strong immune system.
Right. It's used to that.
Yeah, that's why your doctor doesn't want to give you antibiotics because you've got sniffles. Because then, if you, God forbid, get pneumonia, those antibiotics aren't going to work on you. So I don't massive treat the loft. If somebody doesn't look good, I grab them up, I treat them. They go back in quarantine. I will not mass treat the whole loft because there's no need to. If you're not sick, you don't need medicine. And all that's going to do is whack your immune system. And then when you truly are sick, the meds aren't going to work.
Animal husbandry, clean water, good quality food, routine. You obviously even have the biosecurity with the different lofts and stuff set up. So I mean that makes a lot of sense. So with the different breeds that you have, we kind of talked about with like powders, you handle them so that way they're used to people, they're not freaking out when they're in the cage when someone walks up to them. So and we also kind of talked on the feathered feet, some of the things you can do with that. What about with like the short faced breeds that you have? Is there anything in particular that you do with those, like in regards to, I don't know, working with the beak or cleaning the IC or anything like that you do for show prep on those?
I make certain that the beak matches top and bottom. You don't want an overgrown beak. I do not put Vaseline on the beak to make it nice and shiny. I do not color in the toenail that needs to be black that isn't. I don't take tiny little sewing scissors and trim caps up all nice and pretty. I don't pluck that one or two stray feathers that aren't the right color. I don't do that because, in
Mhm.
my opinion, that's cheating.
And I never even heard of coloring the nails to make them black. Yeah, that's totally cheating or yep,
Oh yes,
pulling miscolored
people.
feathers.
Yep, people will do that. If they have a wonky cap, they'll get a little pair of sewing scissors and trim the cap so it's all nice and pretty. They'll trim the roses. You have a bird and it's supposed to be all white, like let's say a nun, okay, and it's supposed to be all white except for the black, hood and face. Oh my God, there's two black feathers on the back. Well, we can make those go away. Well, yeah, but then you're not representing the bird truthfully. So in Bundy's book, that's called cheating. A lot of people call that show prep. It's show prep, but it's like cheating show prep, kind of. you know. And people will do all kinds of stuff. They put Vaseline on the beak to make it shiny, and like I said, they'll color in a toenail. If the bird's got 7 black toenails and 1 white one, well, there's Mr. Sharpie pen that can fix that. It's just like, well, no, because that's a genetic defect with the bird,
Yeah.
and it will pass those defects on. It's not like it's something that happened to the bird after it hatched or whatever. It's a genetic defect, and it will just, continue to pass on. And if you sell the bird, it will pass on. It doesn't make the bird a fair representation of its breed.
Yeah. And as a judge, I mean, you could probably tell, I mean, some of this stuff I'm sure you could see, while you're looking at the different birds, and this one bird is, for whatever reason, its legs are really shiny, and its toenails might look a little funny. I mean, couldn't you tell that anyway as being a pigeon judge?
Yeah, you kind of can. And a lot of judges overlook it. Many, many years ago, I was a parrot judge. And we would have budgie shows. And budgies are supposed to have 7 large dots going under their chin. Usually they have about 20. So a lot of people would pluck out the extra spots. And if your budgie didn't have enough spots, people would take a Sharpie pen and color in spots. And we had a person who did not buy a waterproof Sharpie, and the budgie decided to bathe in the show cage, and the next thing you know, this budgie has got black Sharpie ink running all down its breast, and it was just like, oh, that bird there, steward, toss it. They're cheating.
Well, that's justice pretty quick right there.
Yeah, because I looked and I'm like, what is going on with this bird? And then it was like, oh, they didn't use waterproof Sharpie ink, and the bird took a bath, and now it's got black ink running all over its face. I thought, oh my God, and it's not like anybody's going to give you a $10,000 check. You're going to get a ribbon. Maybe you'll get a $4 trophy. It's just like, really, you're going to, you're going to compromise your integrity.
Yeah.
Your integrity, your name, your good name, the good name of your bird for a $1.25 ribbon?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's just like, you're an idiot. Throw that bird, But yeah, you get to see it all, and the owners that have fits and rant and rave that, oh, you're not qualified to judge and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, you're just saying that because you didn't win, So sorry. Buy better birds and breed better birds. People think they're going to buy crappy birds, and then through some magic miracle, they're going to bring that bird up, and they're going to make that bird into a champion. And it's just like, no. If it's a crappy bird, it's always going to be a crappy bird. And people think, well, but if I take the bad bird and I breed it to a good bird, then I'm going to bring that bird up. And it's just like, no, you're going to bring the good bird down. That's the way that works, and it costs just as much to feed a crappy bird as it does to feed a good bird. So you may as well buy the best that you can possibly afford and start off with good stock. And I wished I would have done that when I first got into birds, because I ended up probably 3 or 4 years into having Pomeranian powders. I literally ended up getting rid of 40 some odd birds and investing tens of thousands of dollars buying the best possible stock, which would have been Madarelli and Kozak, the best possible stock to replace them.
So that's the other thing too. Some people will have just almost like a pigeon farm, just cranking out the numbers, and then they try to just find, because then they might not all be good quality, but every now and then, if you got 1,000 birds, you might be able to yank a good one out. So you're on the other side of it of just start with quality, and you're going to stay there.
Well, yeah, and I didn't realize that. Like I said, the first 4 years, I was picking up, iffy palms wherever I could find them, thinking, oh, through my diligence and hard work and the pigeon god smiling on me, I'm going to make these wonderful birds. And I would take them to shows and just get trounced, just absolutely trounced. And I kept thinking, And finally, after 4 years, it dawned on me that they are always going to be what they are. They're good starter birds. They're fun for yard pretties or whatever you want to call them. But if I really want to be able to do something with them, these are not the birds. And so I literally got rid of every single one except I think I kept like one or two of them with the palms. I contacted my friend who had some of the best pigeons, Pomeranians in the United States, and I said, I have X amount of dollars and I need whatever you can send me. And so I think I got like 21 or 22 pair from him, and those formed my restart. Those formed Palm Beach Loft 2.0.
And you have Bohemian powders too, and some of the markings on those are hard to get to come out really clean. Like how many birds have you banded off of the Bohemian powders this year?
I've only managed to get three because they were super young birds.
Oh, okay. So they're just coming into their own then.
Yeah, so they're just starting to. But I got them from Ryan Bateman, who's got just really some of the nicest ones, and these are really marked good. I used to have Old English saddle muff tumblers, and they're another one of those birds that have to be marked just so. And I would maybe get one good one out of every 25. Yeah, so you have to crank out the numbers, have an outlet for the birds that are like almost there but not quite there, and you don't really want them reproducing. I mean, just to get a couple really nice ones that are actually going to do something for you in the show ring.
Yeah.
Those type of birds are a numbers game.
Because you're going into your loft before the show, and we're all kind of judges in that aspect. When we're picking the bird that we want to take to the show, we're looking at traits, color markings and tameness on some breeds. And, like you said before, it really is breed specific, but you want to take the best thing that you have to the show and then go from there as far as getting it ready for the show.
Well, and sometimes it's a good idea if you know someone else who knows your breed of bird, have them come to your loft and take a look at your birds, because people have a tendency to become what I call loft blind. You see these birds every day for hours every day, and you think they're great. It's like, oh, these birds are great. And then your friend who has the exact same birds comes over and says, well, yeah, they're pretty good, but I mean, what about this and what about that? And you're like, I didn't even notice that. Sometimes it is good to have other people come over and just ask them to say, just look at my birds and critique them, because it's very, very easy to get loft blind.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. Hey, I'm sure we're all pretty biased about that. I mean, even if, oh well, this bird's the friendliest, so I think it looks the nicest, or maybe you think that bird looks good before, and then you just kind of overlook other birds that might be better to be taken to the show.
Yeah, or you're like, oh, this is my most favorite Pomeranian. It comes up to me, it knows its name, it stands on my head, blah blah blah, and you think that that's the best bird, and it's not. Your best bird is like hiding under the nest boxes looking at you or something. So it's actually pretty easy to get loft blind when it comes to that. So it does pay to have somebody come over once in a while and just look through your birds and just say, hey, what do you think? And a lot of times it's like, well, did you notice that it has a foot that's slightly off, or did you notice that this is slightly off? And then you're like, wow, no, I didn't, until you just now pointed it out. And then it's just like, okay.
What was the oldest bird that you've taken to a show and won with?
That would have been, last year, it was a 2012 pygmy. He was on point the entire day. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, when he was supposed to do, and he did it from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The bird was just spot on. And it's just like, sorry, there's no beating that bird. Not today. The bird's going to win. And then I had a young old German cropper that actually won an entire show. I mean, against Chinese owls, against show homers, against everything. It was like top bird out of about 500 birds. Brad Stuckey was the judge who did, the top birds. And I love Brad. I think he's a great person. And nobody ever wants to put a powder number one, and especially not an old German cropper, because they have a tendency to be loose and shabby looking. And I think it was between that one and some, I'm not going to say show homer. I'm probably wrong. Don't quote me on that. He so wanted to place that show homer, and he kept going back to the standard of the old German cropper and kept looking and looking and looking. And I told him, I said, you can look all you want to, I said, you can look down from the top, you can look from the sides. I said, there's nothing to call on that bird. I said, that bird is perfect. And he had to agree with me, and that bird took grand champion. And then the other bird took, like, reserve champion. And that is probably one of the rarest, weirdest things that has ever happened, because powders generally do not take show champions, and especially not an old German cropper, for God's sake, with their loose, floppy feathers going everywhere, and their tail dragging, and their wing flights dragging, and everything. But the bird was just on point, and it was just absolutely perfect.
What's the furthest distance you travel with these birds to go to a show, and how do you cage them up so they're not getting, feather damaged and stuff like that?
Well, I drive to shows because in Bonnie's book, airplanes are not safe. So I don't fly, not at all. Never happened. I rent a van. I have them pull all of the seats out of the van except the two front seats, and I actually have, for a town and country van, a newer one, I've got custom made cages that sit in the back. They sit up on feet so that I can put literally reams of paper and tarps and padding and everything under them. And I put these cages in the back. Don't listen, Hertz Rent-A-Car, and I put these in the back of the rental van, and I put the birds in there, and they travel all day with food. And then whenever I stop, I give them water, and they travel like that. And they generally arrive there just fine. I don't put them in traditional baskets because, A, they don't fit. I do have some custom-made carriers for the palms, but I mean, generally, my birds don't fit. And I'm not going to have them crouched over for 13 hours while I'm driving from here to Louisville.
Right.
So they're in big wire cages that I have had made to fit the back of a town and country van.
Well, especially those Pomeranians, those are big birds. What are the size of the cages?
The cages that I have for them they're probably 4 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot. And they have big doors on them, so I don't have to try to, stuff anybody in there, so that way they can stand up. My English can stand up. The cages are big enough that the old German croppers can go in there without having anybody standing on their tail or pooping on their tail or pooping on their head. You can just take it to all kinds of levels if you want to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that theme of just giving them room, so yeah, if they are going to be in there for a while, they're not getting their feathers damaged, because that'd be a waste if you do. They're looking good all year and then they get ruined on the way to the show. That's an important part to keep in mind.
Well, I can't tell you how many times when we have our local show here, I go into the women's bathroom and there's somebody in there furiously washing their pigeon in the sink.
Wow.
And it was like, if you didn't cram them into these carriers that look like they're designed to hold like chickens or quails or something,
Right.
if
Yeah.
you put them in carriers and don't overcrowd them, then you're not going to be washing your birds in the women's bathroom sink and then praying to God that you can get them dry under the electric hand dryer. Once again, it comes under the category of just common sense and good husbandry.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's throughout. Yep.
And not get sick. Then you practice good husbandry by providing it room. Common sense. People live a lot happier if you have like one human per room rather than 20 humans per room.
Yeah. Will you be going to the Grand National show coming up in is it January, February, up in Oklahoma?
No, because that is too far of a drive for me. I am too old to drive that. People don't realize Florida, while it's very narrow side to side, it's really a long way top to bottom just for me to get out.
Just to get to the border. Yeah.
It's like 8 hours just to get out of Florida, let alone to go anywhere once I have escaped Florida. Louisville is about as far as I personally travel. From my doorstep, it's 13 hours. And on my road atlas, I actually have marked where the good restaurants are, and I have a hotel that I have stayed at like every year since 2008. I have all that marked in a road atlas, so I know exactly where I'm going to stay. And I make the big run the first day, and then I get up Friday morning. I have about a 4-hour drive into Louisville. I get there, I get my birds caged, and then I can go and do more adult activities or something, and relax and enjoy the show a little bit rather than having to deal with the birds because the birds have now been dealt with.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, we're coming up against the clock here, but appreciate you coming on and talking with us again. You always got so much great information for us, and I hope this helps anybody who's kind of getting into the hobby and give them some good pointers. I mean, that common theme of animal husbandry, that rings true in so many episodes.
Yeah, and really, if anybody has any questions or anything, I'm on Facebook. It's Bonnie Lewis. I think I'm the only one on there. If there's more than one of me, I'm the one in the judge's coat.
That's
And
right.
I
Yeah.
know there's not the other Bonnie Lewis is on there in a pigeon judging coat. So you're always welcome to contact me through Facebook, and then we can instant message, or I can call you or whatever. I'm never object to helping people.
Well, thanks for coming on and helping us today.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to take some time and leave a good review for the podcast wherever you do listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, just send an email over to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com, and thank you so much for listening.